I thought my wife was talking to another man. So when I saw her phone glowing in the dark, his name across the screen, I didn't think twice. $7 million was seconds away from landing in my account when my foot came down on that phone like a verdict. Glass exploded across the floor. Her mother screamed. But my wife, Adaise, didn't. She just stared at the shattered screen as it flickered once, twice, then went dark. And something behind her eyes went dark with it. 3 months later, I understood exactly what I had destroyed.
My name is Chukwemeka Ani, and for most of my adult life, I believed I was the kind of man who built things.
My father, Mazi Ani, had started a leather workshop in Aba, a Bia state, back when Ariaria Market was still just a dusty lot with big dreams. He used to say that a man's hands should always smell like the thing he's building. His hands smelled like leather until the day he died. By the time I took over, the workshop had a name, not a big name, but people in the market knew us. We made belts, bags, sandals. Good leather, honest work. I told everyone who would listen that I was carrying my father's legacy. But the truth is that I was just sitting in the chair he had built. The person who was actually carrying the legacy was Adaise. She was my wife of 6 years. We met at a wedding in Umuahia, her cousin's wedding. She was quiet even then, the kind of woman who stood near the back of the reception, watching everything, absorbing everything, while other girls were dancing in front of the DJ booth. I liked that about her. I mistook her quietness for submission. I thought I was marrying a woman who would follow. I didn't realize I was marrying a woman who was simply choosing when to lead. For 6 years, Adaise ran the workshop from the inside. She managed 14 supplier accounts. She tracked payments across 3 banks. She negotiated prices with leather dealers in Onitsha, who had been cheating my father for years. She caught the discrepancies in 3 weeks and renegotiated terms that saved us 400,000 naira a year. She rebuilt our filing system from scratch. She did all of this while cooking dinner, keeping the house, and enduring a husband who came home smelling like Star Lager from Chief Udoka's beer parlor at least 4 evenings a week. She kept a brown leather journal, one she had made herself from scraps in the workshop. Beautiful thing. Smooth cover, tight stitching. She was always writing in it. Numbers, sketches, notes, things I never bothered to read. I used to mock her about it. One evening, my younger brother, Obiora, was at the house. I pointed at Adaise sitting in the corner of the living room, scribbling in that journal. "Look at her," I said. "She thinks she's a professor." Obiora laughed. Adaise didn't look up. She finished what she was writing, closed the journal, and went to the kitchen. I thought that meant I had won something. I thought her silence was obedience. I thought a woman who didn't fight back was a woman who agreed. I was wrong about everything. What I didn't know, what I wouldn't know for another 8 months, was that Adaise had been building something behind my back. Not an affair, not a betrayal. Something far more dangerous to a man like me. She had been building a future. It started 2 years before the night I smashed her phone. A woman named Mame Serwa, a Ghanaian businesswoman based in Accra, ran something called the West African Women's Leather Export Alliance, a trade collective. Women from across the region, Ghana, Nigeria, Senegal, Côte d'Ivoire, pooled their resources, connected artisans with international buyers, and handled the export logistics that no single workshop in Aba or Kumasi could afford alone. Adaise found them online during one of those late nights she spent on her phone, while I thought she was scrolling through gossip blogs. She sent samples. pieces she had designed herself using leather from my workshop. Not the rough sandals and basic belts I was selling at Ariaria. She had refined the designs, added stitching patterns inspired by Igbo uli art, those ancient curvilinear motifs that her grandmother used to draw on walls in the village. She created pieces that looked like they belonged in a European boutique window. Mame Serwa saw what Adayez had. She called her on a Tuesday evening. Adayez took the call outside, near the generator shed, while I was watching Super Eagles highlights in the living room. That call lasted 45 minutes. It was the beginning of everything. Over the next 2 years, they built a relationship through phone calls, WhatsApp messages, and one trip Adayez made to Accra that she told me was a visit to her cousin Ngozi. I didn't question it. I never questioned where Adayez went because I never thought she was going anywhere important. The collective connected her with a luxury brand in the Netherlands, a company called De Hoorn that wanted authentic West African leather goods for their boutique line. The contract was worth $7 million, not overnight. Spread over 3 years of steady production with guaranteed purchase orders and upfront working capital. Adayez had negotiated terms that would have transformed our workshop from a local operation selling at Ariaria to an international exporter with a European retail partner. She structured the deal so that the initial transfer, the first tranche of capital, would land in a joint account with my name on it. My name first. She wanted it to be mine. Ours. She wanted to walk into the workshop one morning and hand me the phone and say, "Chukwuemeka, look what your father's leather became." Every detail was in the journal. Sketches of the product line, pricing breakdowns, shipping logistics from Aba to Lagos Port to Rotterdam. Copies of emails she had written by hand because she was afraid of leaving a digital trail I might stumble on and misunderstand. She knew me. She knew me better than I knew myself. She knew that if I found out before it was finished, I would feel threatened. I would feel small. I would feel like my wife had gone over my head. And when I felt small, I got loud. She was planning around my weakness the way an architect plans around a fault line. She was protecting me from myself. She was right to be afraid. She just didn't plan for how bad it would get. The night it happened, Adayez's mother, Mama Nneka, was visiting from Umuahia. She came once every 2 months or so, always arriving with a cooler of homemade ogiri and dried stockfish, always fussing over whether Adayez was eating enough. The 3 of us had dinner that evening. Adayez made ofe nsala with fresh catfish and pounded yam. She was quieter than usual. Her hands trembled slightly when she poured my water. I didn't notice. I was talking to Obiora on the phone about a football bet. After dinner, Adayez excused herself early, said she had a headache. She went to the bedroom. Her phone was on the bedside table, charging. I stayed downstairs drinking with Obiora, who had come by for the food and the free beer. We killed a crate of gulder between us. Mama Nneka washed the dishes alone, then went to the guest room. It was past midnight when I finally went upstairs. The house was quiet. I pushed open the bedroom door. The room was dark. Adayez was in bed, her back to the door, her breathing slow and steady. And on the bedside table, her phone was glowing. I saw the name first. Emeka O, a man's name. And below it, a message preview that read, "Transfer is processing, almost there." My blood went hot. A man's name. Transfer, almost there. Past midnight. In the dark. My mind didn't walk to a conclusion. It sprinted. It leaped off a cliff and built a whole story before it hit the ground. Emeka Okafor was actually the trade collective's Nigerian side financial coordinator. a 63-year-old retired banker who had spent 30 years at UBA before joining the Alliance as a volunteer. He had grandchildren. He went to Mass every morning at Holy Trinity Cathedral in Aba. But I didn't know any of that. I didn't read the full message. I didn't scroll down. I didn't think. I picked up the phone. Adais woke up. She sat up in bed, saw me standing there with her phone in my hand, and I watched her face change. Not to guilt, not to shame, to fear. The specific fear of a woman who knows exactly what her husband is capable of in the dark. Chukwuemeka, please, let me explain. Explain what? Explain who this man is? Explain what this transfer is. It's not what you think. Please, sit down, and I will show you everything. I will show you the whole thing from the beginning. Show me what? You think I'm stupid? You think I'm a fool who doesn't know what a woman does when she's hiding things on her phone at midnight? She got out of bed. She reached for the phone. Her hands were shaking. She said my name again. That careful, measured way she always said it when she was trying to keep me from becoming the version of myself that frightened both of us. Chukwuemeka, that phone has something very important on it. Something I have been working on for 2 years. For us, please. Give it to me, and I will explain everything. 2 years. She said 2 years. And I heard it. But anger is deaf. Jealousy is deaf. A man's pride, when it feels threatened in the dark, is the deafest thing in the world. I threw the phone on the floor. The screen cracked, but didn't die. It lay there on the tile, the loading bar still visible. 94%. 95. The transfer was almost complete. $7 million, the first tranche of working capital from the Dutch buyer, routed through the Alliance's account in Accra, landing in our joint account at First Bank, was seconds from arriving. Adais dropped to her knees. She reached for the phone. Her fingers were almost on it, and I stepped on it. Not by accident, not in a stumble. I brought my foot down on that screen the way a man stamps out a fire he's sure is dangerous. Glass exploded across the tile. The screen flashed white, then green, then nothing. Mama Neka burst through the door screaming. She saw her daughter on the floor, kneeling in broken glass. She saw me standing over the shattered phone with my chest heaving. She screamed my name like it was a curse word. But Adais didn't scream. She didn't cry. She didn't shout. She knelt there on the floor with her palms open, tiny pieces of glass glittering on her skin, and she looked up at me with an expression I had never seen on her face in 6 years of marriage. It wasn't anger. It wasn't sadness. It was the look of someone watching a building they built collapse from the inside. The look of someone who finally understands that the earthquake was always going to come. They just hoped it wouldn't come tonight. Morning came like a sentencing. The glass was still on the bedroom floor. Nobody had cleaned it. Mama Neka was in the kitchen, red-eyed, making tea she wouldn't drink. She didn't look at me when I came downstairs. She didn't speak. The silence in that kitchen was heavier than anything she could have said. Adais was at the dining table. The leather journal was open in front of her. She wasn't writing. She wasn't reading. She was just looking at it. Her palms had tiny cuts from the glass. She had cleaned them herself, pressed small plasters over the worst ones. She looked like she hadn't slept. I came downstairs expecting the usual cycle. The quiet tension, then the slow softening, then the "it's fine" that wasn't fine, but would hold us together for another week until the next explosion. Instead, Adais closed the journal slowly, like she was closing a door she had walked through for the last time, and looked at me. Her voice was calm, flat, like a doctor reading a test result. I was building something for you, Chukwuemeka, but you didn't want to be built for. I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. She was already standing. She went upstairs. 15 minutes. That's all it took. 15 minutes to pack one bag, not even a large one. A brown duffel. She came down the stairs like she was leaving for a routine trip. Mama Neka followed behind her, carrying nothing, saying nothing, crying in that silent way that mothers cry when they have nothing left to offer their daughters except the act of walking beside them. Adez walked past me. She didn't stop at the doorway. She didn't look back. She didn't deliver a speech or throw a final insult. She walked through the front door, got into her mother's car, and closed the door gently. Not a slam. A click. The sound of something being closed properly. I stood in the doorway and watched them pull out of the compound. Red dust rose behind the tires and hung in the air long after the car had disappeared down the road toward the expressway. I called Obiora that afternoon. "She's gone," I said, and then I laughed. A real laugh. "She'll be back in 2 weeks. Where's she going to go?" Obiora laughed too. "Women," he said, "they always come back." We were both wrong, and we would spend a very long time learning how wrong we were. The first week without Adaizi was an inconvenience. The second week was a problem. By the third week, it was a crisis that I still didn't have the humility to call a crisis. I couldn't find supplier invoices. I didn't know which accounts were due. I called Chidi, our leather supplier in Onitsha, and he told me Adaizi had negotiated a completely new pricing structure 3 months ago. Terms I didn't know existed because I had never asked. The filing system she had built, color-coded paper records organized by date and supplier, was invisible to me because I had never once opened a single folder. I had spent 6 years walking through a machine she had built and had the nerve to call it my own work. The workshop started bleeding. Customers came in and I couldn't find their orders. A man from Wari who had paid a deposit for 50 custom belts came to collect, and I had no record of the transaction. Adaizi had logged it in a separate book I didn't even know existed. He threatened to report me to the Market Association. 2 apprentices quit because I couldn't pay them on time. Emeka, the senior cutter who had worked with my father, pulled me aside one evening and said, "Oga, this place ran on Madam's system. Without her, we are just men standing in a room with leather." I told him to mind his business. He quit the following Monday. Then came the Port Harcourt disaster. An order for 300 belts from a major retailer, our biggest single contract. Adaizi had sourced specialized brass buckles from a supplier in Kano, negotiated bulk pricing, and scheduled delivery weeks in advance. I didn't know the supplier's name. I didn't know the delivery schedule. I didn't even know the buckles came from Kano. The deadline passed. The retailer canceled. I lost the contract, the deposit, and the reputation that my father had built over 20 years, and Adaizi had maintained for 6. Neighbors in the market started talking. I could hear them when I passed their stalls. "That's Mazi Ani's son, the one whose wife left, the one who is running the workshop into the ground." They said it quietly, the way people discuss a funeral before the body is cold. I called her number. Disconnected. I sent Obiora to Umuahia. Mama Neka opened the door, looked at him with eyes that could have set grass on fire, and said, "Tell your brother that my daughter is not a phone he can smash and pick up again." Then she closed the door. Not a slam, a click. Like mother, like daughter. Obiora told me this, and I felt the first real crack. Not guilt yet. Guilt would come later, like a bill you forgot existed. What I felt was unease. A low, heavy thing sitting in my stomach, whispering that I had done something that couldn't be undone. But pride is louder than unease. It always is. So I filled the cracks with pride and told myself I was better off without a woman who kept secrets. 2 months after a day's left, a brown envelope arrived at the workshop. Lagos postmark. Inside was a shipment confirmation from Transnational Cargo Solutions, Victoria Island. 200 units of leather goods, scheduled for export to Rotterdam, the Netherlands. My workshop was listed as the point of origin. My name was on the documents. I read the letter 3 times. My hands were steady, but my mind was not. I called the number at the bottom. A man answered with a professional voice. "Good afternoon, Transnational Cargo. I received a letter about a shipment," I said. 200 leather units to Rotterdam. Can you explain what this is? A pause. Then, "Are you a Daisy's husband?" My mouth went dry. "Yes. She arranged this shipment months ago. The European buyer has been waiting, but the initial capital transfer didn't complete, so the deal is frozen. We've been trying to reach her. The buyer's window is closing." I hung up. My hands were shaking, not from anger this time, from something much worse. The feeling of standing at the edge of a cliff and realizing you've been standing on it your whole life without looking down. I went home and searched the house. Drawers, cabinets, the shelf above the wardrobe. And there it was, the leather journal. She had left it behind. Whether on purpose or in the haste of leaving with one bag and a broken heart, I will never know. But she left it. I sat on the bed and opened it, and I read. Every page, every sketch, every pricing breakdown, every email she had copied by hand to Mame Serwa, to the Dutch buyer at De Hoorn, to Emeka Okafor, the 63-year-old retired banker I had been convinced was her lover. 2 years of work, documented in her small, careful handwriting. The product line she had designed, the shipping routes she had mapped, the negotiations she had conducted from our living room while I was at the beer parlor. On the last written page, she had written, "Joint account, CA and AA transfer, scheduled for Thursday. If this works, his father's name will be on bags in Amsterdam. CA Chukwuemeka Ani, my name, first." I closed the journal. I sat on the bedroom floor, the same floor where I had smashed her phone, where she had knelt in broken glass, and I didn't move for a very long time. Mama Neka had swept up the glass before she left. The floor was clean, but I could still feel it under my feet. I think I will always feel it. Month 3. I went to Lagos. I found the Transnational Cargo Office on Victoria Island. A young woman at the front desk told me the Rotterdam shipment had been canceled. The European buyer had grown tired of waiting and sourced from another supplier. "Where?" I asked. She checked her screen. "Accra, Ghana." I knew before she said it. I knew the way you know a storm is coming before the first drop falls. I flew to Accra, Kotoka International Airport. The heat hit me as I stepped outside, different from Abba's heat, drier, with the smell of exhaust and roasting plantain from the hawkers outside the terminal. I took a taxi through traffic that made Lagos look organized, past billboards and roadside churches, through the chaos of Circle, past Osu Castle, and down toward the Oxford Street Strip. Mame Serwa's trade collective was headquartered on a quieter street just behind the main road, sandwiched between a fabric shop and a juice bar. A small sign on the door read, "West African Women's Leather Export Alliance," in gold lettering on a dark green background. I stood outside for 5 minutes before I had the courage to walk in. The receptionist was a young Ghanaian woman with braids piled high on her head, and an expression that said she had already decided what kind of man I was before I opened my mouth. She asked my name. I told her. She made a phone call, speaking twi in a low, careful voice, glancing at me twice. Then she told me to sit. I sat. I waited. 4 hours I waited. People came and went. Women, mostly, carrying leather samples, fabric swatches, design portfolios. Some spoke English, some Twi, some French. They moved with purpose and confidence. Nobody looked lost. Nobody looked like they were waiting for a man's permission to exist. I sat on that wooden bench and watched them and felt something I had never felt before in my life: irrelevance. I was invisible in that room, not because they were being rude, but because I simply did not matter to the machinery of what was happening around me. This was a world that had been built without me, and it was running perfectly. At one point, a woman walked past carrying a bag, a structured tote made of cognac-colored leather with uli-inspired stitching along the spine. I recognized the pattern instantly. Page 43 of the journal, drawn in blue ink, measurements in the margin, a note that read, "Handle attachment, test double stitch for weight." And now it was real. It was in someone's hand, and it was one of the most beautiful things I had ever seen. My wife had designed that. My wife, who I told, looked like a professor for scribbling in a notebook. My wife, whose phone I crushed because I thought she was talking to a man. When Mame Serwa finally emerged, she was smaller than I expected, late 50s, short gray hair, kente cloth draped over one shoulder, wire-rimmed glasses. She looked at me the way a teacher looks at a student who has failed the simplest question on the exam. "You're Adaizi's husband." Not a question. "Yes, Ma. The deal died because of you, but Adaizi didn't." She told me everything. After the phone was destroyed and the transfer failed, the Dutch buyer's window closed. The $7 million evaporated. But Adaiz didn't collapse. She contacted Mame Serwa directly. She came to Accra with nothing but her skills, her knowledge of the product line, and 2 years of preparation stored in her memory since the journal was back in Aba. The collective rallied around her. They absorbed the initial loss. They restructured. They found a new European partner, a Danish design house called Bjerregaard, that wanted an exclusive line of West African leather accessories. The new contract was larger than the original, and it was in Adaizi's name alone. "She built it again," Mame Serwa said, removing her glasses and cleaning them slowly. "From nothing, in 3 months. Do you understand how rare that kind of person is?" I didn't answer. I already knew. I had married that kind of person and spent 6 years pretending she was ordinary. I begged Mame Serwa to arrange a meeting with Adaiz. She refused. I came back the next day. She refused again. On the 3rd day, I sat in the reception from morning until closing. When Mame Serwa came out and saw me still there, she stood over me for a long time. Then she said, "If you hurt her again, even with a word, even with a tone, there are women in this collective from 12 countries who will make sure you understand consequences in ways no court could." Then she picked up the phone and made the call. The meeting was at a cafe in Lebon. Quiet place. White walls, wooden tables, ceiling fans turning slowly. I arrived an hour early. I bought new clothes. Nothing expensive, just clean. I had the leather journal with me. I had rehearsed what I would say so many times the words felt like a prayer I had memorized. Adaiz walked in at exactly the agreed time. Not a minute early, not a minute late. She looked different, not dramatically, not the way films show women transforming into unrecognizable glamour after heartbreak. She looked settled. That was the only word. Like a tree that had stopped being blown by wind because it had finally found the right soil and put its roots deep enough. She wore a simple blue dress and flat sandals. Her hair was natural, cut close. No jewelry except small gold studs her mother had given her years ago. She sat down across from me and folded her hands on the table. A daze. My voice cracked on the second syllable. Chukwuemeka. I told her everything. I told her I had read the journal, every page, every sketch, every number. I told her I understood what she had built and what I had destroyed. I told her about finding the logistics letter, about calling the cargo company, about the man on the phone asking, "Are you Adaizi's husband?" And the way that question split me open like a machete. I told her I was sorry, not the kind of sorry men throw around like loose change to buy peace, but the kind that comes from the very bottom of something that is broken completely and knows it cannot put itself back together alone. I cried. Right there in that cafe with the ceiling fans and the white walls and a waiter pretending not to watch from behind the counter. I held up the journal and said, "You wrote our future in this book, every page, 2 years of your life." And I stomped on it because I was too proud and too blind and too afraid to see what you were doing. I know that now. I know what I did. And I am asking you, not telling you, not demanding, not pulling rank the way I always did. Asking you to let me try to be the man you were building that future for. The cafe was quiet. A song was playing from a small speaker near the kitchen, something in Ga that I didn't understand. The ceiling fan made a soft clicking sound on every rotation. Adaiz hadn't moved. She hadn't touched her water. She had listened to every word with her hands still folded on the table. And now, she sat there in the silence that followed my speech. And I could see her processing it. Not emotionally, almost clinically, like she was weighing something on a scale that only she could see. She listened. She didn't interrupt. She didn't soften. She didn't harden. She listened the way she had always listened, completely, with her whole self, giving every word the respect of being fully received. And for a moment, one long, trembling moment, I thought it was working. I thought the weight of my sincerity was landing. I thought the tears meant something. I thought the journal in my hands was a bridge back to her. She reached across the table and took the journal. She held it, ran her thumb across the cover, the brown leather she had cut and stitched herself from scraps in a workshop that no longer existed. She looked at it the way you look at a photograph of someone who has died, with love, but also with the knowledge that love alone cannot reverse what has happened. Then she looked at me, and she said, "This journal was my dream for us. But you taught me something, Chukwuemeka. Some men don't want to be saved. They want to be right." She put the journal in her bag. She stood up. She didn't slam the chair. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't cry. She walked out of that cafe the same way she had walked out of our house in Aba. Quietly, completely, and without looking back. The door closed behind her with a soft click, that same click. I sat there for 45 minutes after she left. The waiter came twice to ask if I wanted anything. I didn't. There was nothing left to want. 6 months later, I was back in Aba. The workshop was dead. I had tried to keep it alive alone, but a body without a heart doesn't function for long, and Adaizi had been the heart of that place for 6 years. Every system, every process, every relationship with every supplier. She had built it all, and I had never learned any of it because I had never thought I needed to. I sold the equipment to a man from Niue who was starting his own leather business. He came with a truck and 2 boys, and they loaded everything in 3 hours. 20 years of my father's work, 6 years of Adaise's refinement, carried out through the front door while I stood in the corner and watched. He paid me a fraction of what it was worth, and I took it because I had no leverage and no options. I kept the building. It was my father's name on the deed, but it sat empty. Dust gathered on the cutting tables that had no leather to cut. The smell faded week by week until the workshop smelled like nothing, like absence, like a room that remembers being useful. I took a job at a friend's shop across the market, repairing shoes, replacing worn soles, fixing zippers on cheap bags imported from China, the kind of work my father had done 40 years ago before he saved enough to start the workshop. I had come full circle, except my father's circle went upward, from shoe repairs to a workshop to a name. Mine spiraled down, from a name to a workshop to shoe repairs. The market knew it. My neighbors knew it. Obiora knew it, but was kind enough not to say it to my face. Only once did he come close. He visited one Saturday and found me gluing a sole back onto a schoolboy's shoe. He watched me work for a while. Then he said, very quietly, "Brother, do you think if you called her—" And I looked at him, and he stopped. He never mentioned it again. One afternoon, sitting on a low stool outside the shop with shoe polish on my fingers and the smell of rubber cement in my nose, my phone buzzed. A message from Obiora. No words, just a link. I almost didn't open it. I had stopped reading news and social media because every screen reminded me of the screen I had shattered. But something made me tap the link. Maybe it was the way Obiora sent it. No commentary, no emoji, just the bare URL, like he wanted me to see it, but didn't have the words to prepare me for what I was about to read. It was a feature article in Business Day, Nigeria. The headline hit me like a physical blow. Adaeze Okonkwo, the Aba Woman Building. West Africa's first luxury leather brand from Accra. I read the article slowly, word by word. There were photographs of a bright, airy workshop in Accra, long wooden tables, women artisans cutting and stitching with precision, finished bags and wallets and belts displayed on white shelves, pieces that looked like they belonged in stores I couldn't afford to stand outside of. Buyers from Copenhagen, London, Amsterdam, and there was Adaeze, standing in the center of the workshop, not posing, not performing, just standing with one hand on a workbench, the other resting on a leather journal, open on her desk. I zoomed in on the photograph. The journal was brown leather, but it wasn't the same one. It was new. The pages visible in the photo were white, blank, fresh. She had started a new journal, a new book of plans and sketches and pricing and futures, and I was not in it. I don't expect sympathy. I'm not telling this story so you'll feel sorry for me. I'm telling it because someone needs to hear what it sounds like when a man finally admits that he was the villain of his own life. Adaeze didn't take revenge. She didn't curse my name to her friends. She didn't send people to humiliate me. She didn't post about me online or drag me through the market of public opinion. She just moved forward, and that is worse than anything she could have done to me. Because anger means you still exist to someone. Hatred means you still take up space in their mind. But when someone simply moves forward, truly, cleanly, completely, it means you have been erased, not with malice, with growth, and Adaeze erased me the worst way possible. She outgrew the version of her life that included me, and she kept going. I think about the journal every day, both of them. The one she left behind, full of our future, the future I destroyed, and the new one, full of pages I will never read because they were never meant for me. I think about her handwriting, the sketches, the careful numbers, the 2 years of brilliant, patient, invisible work she did for a man who mocked her for writing in a notebook. I smashed a phone, but what I really destroyed was the only person who ever looked at me and saw someone worth building a future for. She was right about the leather, right about the international market, right about the business, right about everything. And she was right about me. Some men don't want to be saved. They want to be right. I wanted to be right. And now I sit in Abba, repairing shoes that aren't mine, living in a building that used to be a workshop, carrying a name that was supposed to be on luxury bags in Amsterdam. My father's leather, her vision, our future, all of it, gone under my foot. I pass the empty workshop every morning on my way to the shoe shop. The padlock on the door is rusting. Sometimes I stop and look through the window. The cutting tables are still there. The buyer from Niue didn't want them. They sit in the dust like gravestones. That phone I smashed? The screen flickered twice before it went dark. I think about those 2 flickers every single night. 2 flickers. 2 last attempts to finish what a days had started. 2 chances the universe gave me to stop, to think, to lift my foot and let the transfer complete. I didn't. And now I live in the dark that came after. That's what I destroyed. That's what I'll never get back. If this story made your chest tighten, if you felt the silence, the regret, the power, the loss, then you already know these aren't just stories. These are the moments that change people forever. On this channel, we don't tell soft endings. We tell the kind of stories that follow you long after the screen goes black. Stories about betrayal, power, love, revenge, and the quiet moment someone realizes they lost everything that truly mattered. Subscribe now. Stay with us, because the next story is even more ruthless, and you won't be able to look away.